is Jean Marie Ward for BuzzyMultimedia.com, reporting from Balticon 45. With me today is Paolo Bacigalupi, multi-award-winning author of The Wind-Up Girl, Shipbreaker, and many thought-provoking short stories. Welcome.
Thanks.
You covered environmental issues for High Country News for several years before turning your hand to fiction. Was it a conscious decision to integrate those themes into your fiction, or did it just happen?
It was a fairly conscious decision, actually. First, when I was first writing short stories, I was really interested in just trying to make characters do what you wanted them to do. You wanted them to march through their scenes, you wanted them to be effective, you wanted the challenges to seem real, things like that. After some point, though, those challenges really aren't very interesting, and so then you start looking for other things to do with your stories, and so I started trying to illustrate ideas more, and I think the first time I really did that was with The People of Sand and Slag, which was sort of an exercise in thinking about environmental issues and human innovation, and that sort of started off this whole ramp of different sort of investigations for me, and it's basically informed all of my fiction since then. And I think, for me at least, one of the things that I find is that it's very difficult to sort of feel like you're justified in spending your time being a writer or doing these things if there isn't some purpose or outcome that you're sort of hoping for, some set of ideas that seem important enough to sort of kill all those trees to make all those books. So I found that it's fairly necessary also for me to have those ideas in play, those environmental questions and things that are concerns in my daily life, and to have those infuse my fiction makes the fiction feel relevant to me and justifiable to me in some ways. So
the fiction of ideas or the fiction of issues can be a hard sell. How do you make it fun?
I think I'm not sure if I do make it fun.
Well, the sales and the awards would seem to think so.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, when The Wind-Up Girl went out, it was actually almost universally rejected, specifically because people didn't think it was any fun. And they didn't see a lot of sales potential, both because it was hard science fiction, but also it was dark science fiction, and it felt depressing and, you know, dystopian. And while it's popular in YA fiction, isn't at all well loved in adult fiction and adult science fiction. And so I think honestly what was really happening with something like The Wind-Up Girl is it feels relevant to people. I think that's more than anything what drives its sales. There are interesting ideas and there's all sorts of layers inside of it, but I think that relevance is the thing that makes the book get handed on from person to person. I could be totally wrong. But in terms of when you take issue fiction, and when I mean, the biggest danger with issue fiction, any kind of issue fiction, is that you're going to end up preaching. That's the fear that everybody has when they pick up a book. It's whether it's, you know, a feminist book or an ecological book or a Communist Manifesto, whatever the hell it is. You're worried that you're just going to get preached at, and then you're just going to say, get this party line, and that's going to kill story. And so the thing that I've found works most effectively is to actually have your setting make the argument about your values. The setting in The Wind-Up Girl and the setting in Shipbreaker also they're both devastated worlds. People are already living inside of the consequences of all our bad decisions. It's not oh, the good people over here are going to fight against the bad people over here and save the environment. No. It's going to be everybody just lives in the consequences of our present-day bad decisions, and they try to hack it out as best they can. So you have all of those moral shades of gray, you have all those interesting sort of human conflicts, because the characters themselves don't have to specifically illustrate the larger set of issues. You let the background, you let the environment do that, and you let the characters actually just be human beings, and I think that's part of it too.
You studied Chinese in college, and you've traveled extensively in Asia. What impact, if any, has that had in your fiction? I know in The Wind-Up Girl you said it in
Thailand.
Thailand, yeah. What other, I mean, has it given you a different perspective on the universe or on the world of science fiction?
I think Yeah, I think probably one of the most valuable things that ever happened to me actually was that I went to China when I was in college, and studying Chinese and living in China meant that I was running up against a culture that didn't look at the world exactly the way that I looked at the world, and you know, I remember this moment after I'd been living in China for a long time, and I had come back to the United States, and I was sitting in a park, and suddenly I noticed that all around me there were these rats running around in the park, these rodent things, and I kept looking at them and thinking, why isn't anybody else concerned about these rodents? They're everywhere. These things, these rats, these rodents are everywhere, and I was really disturbed by them. And then suddenly I realized that they were squirrels. And it was this really strange moment because in China there were no animals anywhere around. It was a very dead environment. So coming back to the United States, the first translated sort of version of animal in park that I came to was actually rat. And that jumped into my head, and it's like, why do we let these rodent things run around? And you realize that customarily we just do that. We just say that squirrels are a nice naturey sort of rodent as opposed to rats. And you see that sort of cultural assumption in play. You never noticed rodents like that before. Squirrels were just squirrels. And yet suddenly they became alien because I'd been abroad and because I came back. And I think there's something in that where when you've lived somewhere else and you've run into a whole lot of other people's cultural assumptions that are very different from yours, that's one sort of slap in the face where you really start looking around at the world and thinking differently. But even more so when you come back to your home country and all of the assumptions of your world suddenly look like these weird made-up things. And I think as a science fiction writer, you're always sort of looking for those interesting assumptions that we make. We say, well, of course we drive our cars to work and back, and it just feels so natural and normal, and nobody's going to question it. And it's like, no, why? What built this? What made this custom? And why do we continue to do it? And it starts you down those lines of questioning where you're suddenly an outsider looking at those daily parts of your life that you took for granted instead of being an insider and not paying attention.